Hey everyone, my name is Wesley and welcome back to another Destiny 2 video. In today's video I'll be showing you all how a person with zero skill on PC managed to solo the Pit of Heresy dungeon on my hunter. For the weapons I use the Izanagi's Burden, the Recluse with the minor spec. I've seen quite a few people use Barrier mod, which is useful for knights, but I just preferred keeping the minor spec on. And then my power weapon was a 21% Delirium with the major spec. For my armor I used the Wormhusk mask, which is probably the most useful piece of gear in this build, just because it gives you a small portion of your health back every time you dodge. Then for the rest of the armor, the actual armor is not that important. What you're aiming for is to get as many Paragon mods as you can, so that you can use your class ability dodge as much as possible, allowing you to get health back when you're in a tricky situation. One of the other useful mods that I equipped was the mod that comes from your artifact, allowing your void grenades to weaken the enemies and you to cause more damage to the enemies when they're in your void grenades. It's very useful for boss encounters and for tough knights throughout the dungeon. For this dungeon there are 5 main parts. The first section is called Necropolis, which is basically a vertical maze, you could call it. Then the next 3 sections are called the Pit, but they can quite easily be broken down into 3 separate parts. The first section is another maze, more horizontally, 3 main paths. The third section is, for me, the hardest part of the dungeon. Then there's the 4th section, which is another maze, another horizontal maze, and then the 5th and final section with the boss is called the Cradle of Damnation. Yes, I know what you're saying. All of these have very cheerful names. In the first section, you'll come across a bunch of hive symbols on top of rooms that you can go into and clear out ads. Each room will have a door that is blocked that you cannot get into until you have killed a knight outside the room called the Pit Keeper. Once the Pit Keeper is killed, you will be allowed to enter the room, and depending on whether it is a boss room or not, you will know what to do next. In the back of the room, regardless of if it is a boss room or not, you will see 3 symbols above each other. These symbols will represent the rooms that you need to go to find 3 mini-bosses throughout the encounter. Once you have defeated all 3 mini-bosses, you will be able to progress onto the next section. Throughout the map, you will come across knights called Accursed Sword Bearers. When you kill these, they will drop a sword that you can pick up and use against the bosses. The swords are the only way to damage the bosses, and any other source of damage will not actually damage the boss. There are 3 main mini-bosses to defeat in this section. There's a Shrieker, called the Oracle of the Broken Blade, a Wizard, called the Omen of the Broken Blade, and a Knight, called the Might of the Broken Blade. For the Shrieker portion, you'll need to clear the adds outside the room, including the Pit Keeper. Go and find an accursed swordbearer, kill them, pick up their sword, and take it back to the room. I highly suggest taking out the ogres in the room before attempting to kill the Shrieker, as I have been killed by them a couple times, even while blocking damage. When you have picked up a sword from an accursed swordbearer, you will need to go back to the room and stand in front of the Shrieker and basically let it shoot you while you use the sword's block ability. This will reflect the Shrieker's bullets back to itself and damage it. Once the Shrieker is killed, you will need to move on to the next room, or if it is the last boss, move on to the final room. For the wizard section, you will need to do the same as the Shrieker part, where you clear all the adds outside the room, including the Pit Keeper, walk around the maze until you find an accursed swordbearer, pick up its sword, and go back to the room. For the wizard, you will need to use the sword's heavy attack to damage the wizard. Nothing else will damage it. This section can be quite tricky because the wizard does like to hide behind walls, which means you need to go into the room and there's a potential for you dying. What I suggest is don't jump when you use your heavy attack, because the bolt of energy does a funny dip thing where it doesn't actually track the wizard effectively. I suggest staying on the ground if you can and aiming slightly above the wizard, allowing your bolt to dip into the wizard. Once the wizard is dead, you'll need to move on to the final mini-boss, which is the knight. For the knight, do the same thing as the other two bosses, clear all the adds outside the room, including the Pit Keeper, go find an accursed swordbearer, pick up its sword and go back to the room. The knight room is probably one of the easiest, because all you have to do is hit the knight. What I'd suggest is, if you're nervous and you're trying to go for flawless, wait for the sword's supercharge to full and then use the supercharge close to the knight and run away. It does take a lot longer to do, but it is the safer option. If you don't want to do this, you will need to use the sword's light attack on the knight, which a few times while doing it, the knight hit me and bounced me across the map, killing me against a wall. So do whatever you're comfortable with. After you've killed all three mini-bosses, you will need to walk back out and look for the room or the hive symbol with a beam of green light shooting out of it. Go to that room, clear all the adds, there will be a lot more adds. Clear all of the adds, including the Pit Keeper, into the room, and that will be the end of the encounter. Some advice I can give you for this first section: there's ogres that will be walking around the map. If you see them, kill them. They can catch you off guard where you're hiding from an acolyte or the Pit Keeper, and all of a sudden an ogre walks up behind you or on the platform down below you and kills you very quickly. Another thing is try to come up with something that reminds you of the 3 symbols, so that you don't have to keep going back and checking and clear a room or clear the outside of a room and the pit keeper and everything for a room that doesn't have a boss in it. There are also these elevator type things throughout the map which allow you to get to the higher rooms throughout the map. These are quite buggy. I don't know if it's been fixed yet, but jumping on them is not a good idea because it can glitch you through them and kill you. Now, weapon wise, what I would suggest is using your Izanagi's burden on the accursed sword bearers, which one-shots them, and the ogres, which one-shots them. Everything else, use the recluse. You shouldn't need the 21% delirium for this section. I know I used it a couple times, but that's because I get quite panicky when there's a lot of ads around. The weapons you'll need for this dungeon, if you're going to do it the way I did it, are Izanagi's burden, recluse, 21% delirium, crimson, and a secondary high impact sniper rifle is probably best. Once you have finished the section, if you haven't done this dungeon before, just follow the path I take to the next part, being very careful at this loading section because it can randomly kill you. However, I've heard that it does not count as a death and will not affect your flawless run. Regardless of if you die or not, it's important to teabag it and shoot it a bit, just for all our brothers that have died. Now, the first section of the pit is basically a maze with 3 lanes. There's a left lane, a central lane, and a right lane. Now, when you drop down, if you look slightly to your left, there's a hole on the wall with some hive goo on it, and if you shoot that, you can go into the tunnel, and I highly suggest you do that because that is one of the tunnels you need to go into. Throughout the maze, there are these huge ogres that you cannot damage and that kill you fairly quickly. So Night Stalker dodge is very handy again because you can go invisible and run past them. Now, you'll know you're in the correct caves when you find acolytes and knight called a heretical knight and some thrall. If there's just thrall in the cave, then you've probably gone into the wrong cave. Now, once you kill the heretical knights, they will drop an orb or void charge, which you will need to pick up and take to one of 3 doors at the end of each lane, which is usually guarded by an ogre. I suggest as you're about to get to an ogre, if you're using the Night Stalker subclass, dodge while holding E. This will turn you invisible and pick the orb back up, as you can see me do on several occasions. Once you've deposited the orb into the door orby thing, if you are battling to find the caves, I suggest you just follow the path I took. It gets me to the caves fairly quickly without getting lost too much. Once you get the first orb to the left lane and get back into the cave that I go into, you'll find your second heretical knight, making sure to shoot your shadow shot into a bone. It is far more effective this way. When you kill the heretical knight, take the orb and go out of the cave in the opposite way to the way you came in. This should put you into the central lane. Now, when you get to the central lane, do the same thing, deposit the orb in front of the door and move on to the next cave. Once you've done this for all 3 lanes, the doors will open and you'll get onto the second section of the pit. Some advice for this section would be to not underestimate the ogres. They can kill you very quickly, as well as if your invisibility runs out as you're about to go past them, they will smash the ground and sometimes shoot you into a wall and kill you. Weapons for this section are basically the same as the previous section. No need to change anything, including your subclass, top tree Night Stalker with reloading dodge. Now on to the next section. For the next section of the pit, I changed my loadout to Crimson, high impact sniper rifle, in my case Beloved, and kept 21% delirium on. I've seen people do it with Wendigo, which is good for doing good area of effect damage, and I've seen people use Golden Gun, Celestial Nighthawk, which is good for one-shotting the Heretical Knights. This section for me was by far the hardest of the dungeon. I died a lot, and I mean a lot. I had about another 3-hour recording of me just dying. So, good luck. The reason I found it so hard is because there are acolytes, and thousands of them, which just throw bombs at a plate that you need to stand on, and that's just a recipe for a nightmare if you ask me. The Heretical Knights also do a lot of damage if you don't take care of them quickly. There's 2 knights shooting their hive boomers at the plate, which pop up after you deposit an orb, which do a lot of damage. There's ads glitching and flying all over the place and appearing on your plate when they shouldn't be, and yeah, I did not enjoy this section. So basically, when I eventually got down to it, the best method I found is as follows. There's a central plate that you need to protect, which is being worshipped by 6 acolytes at the start, which you can see. You need to stand on this plate or your curse of suffering goes up, and if you don't stand on it often enough, then the totem type thing on the plate starts lighting up. You hear a hive screech thing, and all of a sudden you wipe. So whenever you can, be on the plate, clear ads as much as you can. I suggest using Crimson on the acolytes and the thrall that you'll encounter after you've deposited the first orb. Also using 21% delirium for acolytes, and then using your sniper on the Heretical Knights. When you're standing on the plate and looking back at the spawn point, you'll see 3 other sections that have ads during the encounter. There's the left section, back section, and the right section. Now what I suggest is to alternate between the left and the right. The back is just a bit tricky because you have stuff shooting at you from both sides as well as the back. So what you will need to do is stand on your plates as often as you can, then clear the ads, or clear as many ads as you can. Take out the Heretical Knights on one of the sides. You'll see it drop an orb. Run to that side as quickly as you can, bearing in mind that you may need to stand on your plate before depositing it, just because you've taken too long. The orbs can also despawn, so you don't want to leave them too long while clearing more ads. Once you've picked up the orb, go back to your plate, deposit the orb in the door orby thing. Do this 6 times and you will finish the encounter. After each orb deposit, a wave of thrall with 2 yellow bar cursed thrall will come at you. You'll need to kill as many as you can, but what I suggest is once you've deposited the orb, take out your 21% delirium, take out the acolytes in the middle, shoot at the thrall as they're coming down the stairs, but then dodge so you go invisible, take out your sniper rifle and make sure you shoot the 2 knights with their hive boomers up at the top above the back ad section. These guys do a lot of damage, and jumping over thrall while they're shooting at you is not a good idea. So dodge, go invisible, take out 1 knight at least, run around jumping over thrall, dodge as soon as it's up again, take out the other knight, and then switch to your crimson or your 21% delirium and take out the thrall, every thrall if possible, because you don't want to be going back to your plate at low health and the thrall gets you while you have the orb. I suggest using your tether wherever you can. There's no point in holding on to it. If you're stuck with a lot of thrall on your plate, or you have a bad rotation and there's a big section of acolytes near heretical knights, shoot your tether at them, damage them as much as you can, and basically don't hold on to it because it doesn't do you any good then. Your dodge ability should be used like a kid on Halloween with candy. If you have it, you should eat it. Basically, as soon as it's up, use it. Or basically, as soon as it's up, if you're not at full health, use it. You are going to be very rushed in this section and not have time to think about saving it for later. Now, what I found after dying about 1,000 times in this part is that the best way to do it is just to panic, but to panic efficiently and effectively. Now, how you do that is to not panic. Yeah, basically this section is very tough. There's a lot that can go wrong during a flawless run on the hunter. I think using a Titan with barrier or their overshields and one-eyed mask and whatever, or a warlock with their well of radiance and all the healing they have, will make this section a lot easier. But as a hunter, your healing is very limited, so Crimson is your friend, Wormhusk Mask is your friend. Use them and hopefully it helps you get through this section. After you finally beat this part and move on to the next part, you'll notice it's also called the pit. It is the final section of the pit and is another maze. It's similar to the first part where there are rooms around the maze with symbols on. As you drop down into the start of the pit, you'll see the 3 symbols that you need to go to the corresponding rooms. Once you go to these rooms, you'll see a wizard called a Malevolent Ritualist. You'll need to kill this and do it at each room and it will open the main central door. If you get lost, follow the path I took to the main central door. But what I found really helped in this section, rather than having to look up a map if you're lazy like me, is basically run around until you see a red tick on your map and go in that direction, because it usually means that's the room you need to go to. There's not much that can go wrong in this section apart from not seeing a swinging ball and getting hit by it, or messing up your jump and falling in a hole. I suggest switching to your final boss loadout before you start the section, just so that you can pick up ammo throughout the encounter and not have to waste a raid banner on your first attempt of the boss. Once you get to the final boss room, you'll notice it gives you a warm and fuzzy feeling when you see the Cradle of Damnation name. Ignore this. Gamers don't get warm and fuzzy feelings. For the final boss encounter, you'll be fighting the main boss called Zulmak, Instrument of Torment. The names just keep getting better. This encounter will combine basically all the previous mechanics that you've had to use throughout the dungeon, whereby you'll first need to kill the 3 mini-bosses, the Shrieker, the Wizard, the Knight, using the sword from the Cursed Sword Bearers that you find in the middle near the boss. You'll need to use the same techniques you used for the first encounter, where you use your light attack on the Knight, block on the Shrieker, and heavy attack on the Wizard. This section I died quite a few times as well, but mostly because of stupid things that I did and not the encounter being too hard or bugs or anything along those lines. So if you are willing to be patient, which I eventually was, and do everything as it should be done, you shouldn't have any problems. Once you kill the 3 bosses, instead of just leaving the rooms like you would in the first part of the dungeon, they will drop an orb and you'll need to deposit it into the orby things. Once you do this 3 times, the boss area will glow green. You'll need to stand in this, and that will allow you to damage a boss. I suggest using Izanagi's Burden with the Honed Edge perk active to damage the boss as much as you can, and then switching to something like 21% Delirium and or maybe Wendigo and doing as much damage before you need to get out. Now you'll know you need to get out when he slams his sword into the ground and kneels and the floor starts to glow orange. Once he slams the sword into the ground and kneels, you'll be able to damage him for a bit longer, but when you see the floor start to turn orange, you'll need to get out of there or he will kill you. I suggest moving around as much as you can as well while you're damaging him, just because there are Thrall running around, as well as Curse Thrall and any leftover sword bearers that you forgot. The boss also does an area of effect flamethrower type attack out of his sword, which can very easily kill you if you're standing in the same spot. I'll show you the first complete cycle, including damage phase, and then fast forward the remaining sections to the end of the dungeon. As you'll see, it took me about 6 damage phases because my damage was awful, because I have 0 skill, and I was at this point I had died quite a lot, so I was just trying to be patient and do it without messing around or trying to do too much damage and dying. You'll notice I did not get the solo achievement during this dungeon because I left, went to orbit and came back to a checkpoint. I had been told and had experience doing this during the Shattered Throne dungeon, where you still get the achievement, however apparently not for this one, so that's great. So I will probably only get the achievement when I do it on a Warlock or a Titan and try go for Flawless. But I hope this guide helped you. I hope it causes you less stress than it caused me. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already. I appreciate all the people who have subscribed to my channel already. All the feedback has been positive. You guys are awesome. I will keep on gaming and trying to put out videos, and I'll catch you hopefully in the next video. Goodbye.